All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I've got 6:05 on my clock here, and it looks like we've got just about everyone that has signed up. We can catch folks up who may be running a little bit late as they join. All right, so my name is Terry Fletcher. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. I want to welcome everyone to the DEP's virtual public meeting for the Division of Air Quality Permit application for Thunder Mountain Environmental Services, LLC, permit R133563. With me tonight is staff from the Division of Air Quality, including Director Laura Crowder, New Source Review Program Manager Bev McCoon, Permit Engineer Ed Andrews, and Environmental Resource Specialist Nicole Ernest. The purpose for this public meeting is to provide information, answer questions, and primarily give you the opportunity to share your comments or information about this permit application with the DEP. This meeting is being recorded so that the comments you share can be taken into consideration and entered into the public record for the permit application. A decision will not be made this evening. All comments received by the agency prior to the close of the comment period, including those provided here tonight, will be reviewed and considered by the staff, and you will receive notification once a decision is made. The comment period for this permit application opened on May 26, 2023, and will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. Please note that comments can be submitted via email to Ed Andrews at edward.s.andrews@wv.gov or by regular mail to Ed Andrews at the DEP, Division of Air Quality, 601 57th Street Southeast, Charleston, West Virginia, 25304. Now we'll include Mr. Andrews' email address and mailing address in the meeting chat before the end of the meeting this evening so that everyone can have access to that. To ensure that we have an accurate record of everyone attending this evening, we ask that you please provide your name and contact information for the official record. Please enter your name and email address in the meeting chat by clicking the small text bubble icon in the bottom right corner of your screen. We will open the meeting with a brief presentation by Mr. Andrews, which will touch on the DAQ's permitting process and requirements, as well as technical details of Thunder Mountain's permit application. We will then move on to a question and answer session. Any questions that we cannot answer this evening will be answered in the agency's response to comments document for this permit application. After all questions have been asked, we will then take official comments. Please note that once we have moved on to the official comment portion, we will no longer be able to answer any questions. Any questions that you ask as part of your comments will be addressed in the response to comments document. Each commenter will be given 5 minutes to speak, and I will call on those who registered to provide comments first, and then call for any additional commenters. If there's time at the end, we can circle back to allow for additional testimony. To ensure that we successfully achieve the purpose of this meeting, we ask that everyone be respectful and considerate of each other by refraining from using foul language and from name calling and from interrupting others while they are speaking. We also ask that you keep your comments on the topic of this permit application so that our time together is used efficiently. So thank you again for bearing with me through all those opening remarks and instructions. I'm now going to turn the floor over to DAQ Permit Engineer Ed Andrews. Ed?
Evening. I'm Ed Andrews, a permit engineer assigned to the Department of Environmental Protection's Division of Air Quality New Source Review Permitting Work Group. My primary duties at the Division of Air Quality is to review and prepare recommendations for assigned construction and modification applications submitted under our minor source permitting rule, which is Title 45 Legislative Rule Series 13, or known as 45 CSR 13, and referred to as Rule 13 permit. Tonight, I would like to go over this presentation regarding Thunder Mountain's environmental services permit application for a waste to energy facility to be located near Ravenswood, West Virginia. Permitting process, what is being permitted, permit requirements, limits, monitoring, testing, and other potential required approvals, and a summary, which must include the proof that the applicant published a legal ad. For the purposes of this ad is to making the public aware that application has been submitted to the Division of Air Quality, and additional information on the application can be obtained by contacting the agency. In addition, the public is encouraged to make comments on the application at this time. This is the first opportunity the public has to comment, but not the last. The application is reviewed for completeness. What we're looking for in the application besides the administrative items is, did the applicant quantify the emissions from the emission units and identify the applicable rules and regulations, which includes whether compliance is going to be achieved with these rules and regulations. Once the division is satisfied the application is complete, an engineering evaluation and recommendation is prepared. This recommendation document is usually in the form of a draft permit. Should it be determined that application reasonably shows that compliance with all rules and regulations will be met, the division will initiate a public comment period to allow the public an opportunity to comment on the application, the agency's findings, and a draft permit. After the 30-day public comment period has closed, the division will review all air quality related comments with respect to the application before making a final decision on the application. The division must provide a response to these air quality related comments that pertain to the proposed facility before making a final decision on the application. For the Thunder Mountain Environmental Services application, all pertinent information on this application can be found on our website under popular searches. Thunder Mountain Environmental Service proposed to construct and operate a gasifier which will be fed infectious medical waste. The gasifier will process the medical waste into a synthetic gas which will be burned as generated. The residual heat energy from burning the synthetic gas will be extracted in a boiler to generate steam, which will be used to provide process heat for the gasifier and to make electricity needed to operate the facility. The application identifies a shredder, associated conveyors, which will be used to reduce the size and transport the medical waste to the gasifier. The gasifier will reduce the solid medical waste into a synthetic gas, which is a low BTU value gas. A fire tube will be used to combust the synthetic gas, with the exhaust being directed into a waste heat boiler where heat energy will be converted into steam. The excess steam that is not needed by the gasifier will be used to drive a steam turbine that will provide electricity for the facility. Thunder Mountain Environmental Services has proposed several add-on style control devices to control the emissions from the combustion of the synthetic gas, which will be discussed in further detail in the next slide. Also, emergency generator will be available to provide emergency electricity in the event that the facility loses electrical service or the steam turbine trips. Add-on controls. The cyclone is used to remove large particulate matter, PM, from the exhaust leaving the waste heat boiler. Downstream of the cyclone will be a dry scrubber that will use sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, with intent to react with the acid gases, which include sulfur dioxide, sulfuric acid, hydrogen chloride, another acid, hydrogen fluoride, as well as another acid, to form a particulate matter which can be removed in the fabric filter baghouse. Activated carbon is to be injected downstream of the dry scrubber. The activated carbon is used to absorb the dioxins, furans, and mercury in the exhaust and collect it in the fabric filter baghouse. After the activated carbon injection system, a fabric filter baghouse is used to remove fine particulate matter, which includes filterable particulate matter less than 10 microns and filterable PM less than 2.5 microns, as well as non-mercury metals. What types of waste will be processed? Medical waste. Medical or hospital waste is a mixture of different types of waste. The permit outlines what types of waste is accepted. Most of these types pertain to or originates from the human body. Non-hazardous pharmaceutical drugs waste will be processed, which implies that some drugs are classified as hazardous under the Resource and Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA. I will add to this on the following slide. What types of waste are prohibited? The Division of Air Quality must ensure known sources of hazardous waste is not being improperly disposed of or treated. Because Thunder Mountain has applied for a permit for processing non-hazardous medical waste, therefore the permit cannot allow any waste that is also known as hazardous waste to be introduced into the gasifier. Most chemotherapy drugs are listed as hazardous. Thus, any expendable material or residual chemotherapy medications are considered to be hazardous waste as well. Some pharmaceuticals are listed as hazardous, and therefore any unused pharmaceuticals that are listed as hazardous becomes hazardous waste, which is also prohibited under the permit. I would like to note that the division, with assistance of the Division of Water and Waste Management, has developed a handout to educate the medical industry in recognizing what drugs are classified as hazardous under RCRA. This handout will be posted on our website soon. Some types of waste, such as low-level radioactive waste or waste material contaminated with infectious agents, need to be disposed by approved means instead of the proposed gasifier. Permit requirements. The draft permit consists of 5 sections. 1 through 3 are standard in our permits today. Section 5 pertains to specific requirements for the emergency generator. Section 4, which will be discussed in further detail in the following slides, which covers the gasifier and the facility's activities that involved handling, storing, and processing the medical waste. Proposed emissions. Presented in this slide are the facility-wide total annual emission rates by pollutant, which includes point sources as well as fugitive sources such as haul roads from the facility. These rates reflect the proposed emission units with associated control devices implemented at the permitted capacity or rating of the emission unit. None of the rates for the criteria pollutants are above 100 or 250 tons per year, which are the major source thresholds for the Title V operating permit and major source permitting rules, respectively. Thus, the facility is a minor source of air pollution. The facility will be classified as an area source of hazardous air pollutants, HAPs, because the total HAPs for the facility is less than 25 tons per year. Hydrogen chloride emissions consist of nearly all of the total HAPs for the facility, which are emitted from the gasifier. A breakdown of these fugitive PM amounts as well as the emissions from the emergency generator can be found in the engineering evaluation. Applicable requirements. State Rule 45 CSR 18, Rule 18, which established standards for existing and new medical waste incinerator units. The reason the proposed gasifier is subject to this rule is that A, the unit is processing medical waste, B, the application does not indicate any of the exclusions in 40 CFR 60.50C, D through G are satisfied, C, air emissions are released from the gasifier process. Thunder Mountain's gasifier is a new unit under this rule. Therefore, Rule 18 refers new units to subpart EC of 40 CFR Part 60, which is referred to as the Medical Waste Incinerator Rule. The emission standards in subpart E sub C are more stringent than the emission standards guidelines that Rule 18 incorporates for existing units, which are based on EPA's emission guidelines. Rule 18 is focused on regulating non-pollutants regardless if the unit is existing or new. One of the non-regulated pollutants is dioxins and furans. The dioxin furan standard is 9.3 nanograms per standard cubic meter. To put nanograms into perspective, 1 kilogram contains 1 trillion nanograms. Besides outlining how compliance with the standards or guidelines will be conducted, these regulations establish other requirements which include operator training qualifications, requires a waste management plan to be developed and implemented. The associated control devices will be required to be inspected annually, plus there's reporting requirements. Should the applicant elect to process plastic feedstock through the gasifier or use other materials as feedstock down the road, then a modification permit is required even if the emission potential from the gasifier would decrease due to the change. Monitoring parameters. Most of the monitoring is required by the medical waste incinerator rule, such as the feed rate of the medical waste into the gasifier, the feed rate of the absorbent and activated carbon, temperature of the bag house, dust leaks from the bag house, and the position of the bypass vent. The division believes additional monitoring is necessary, which consists of monitoring the gasifier process parameters and the temperature and pressure drop of the cyclone, as well as the natural gas usage. Testing. The permit will establish testing requirements, which are again based on the medical waste incinerator rule. PM10 and PM2.5 are not directly addressed in the rule. Therefore, the division has included initial compliance demonstration for these two pollutants using the appropriate test method. Based on recent public input on a similar medical waste facility, division believes a continuous emission monitoring is appropriate for this type of emission unit, which consists of monitoring for 4 of the criteria pollutants and 19 of individual hazardous air pollutants, of which includes hydrogen chloride. The medical waste incinerator rule requires annual PM testing for the first 3 years of operation. If compliance with the PM standard is achieved during all 3 years, then the PM testing frequency can be reduced to once every 3 years. There are visible emission standards for fugitive emissions from the ash handling equipment, which the rule requires an annual compliance demonstration. The permit does require the permittee to conduct a hazardous determination in accordance with 40 CFR 262.11 once per year for all streams leaving the gasifier process, which includes the wet ash handling system as well. Other potential required approvals. Here is a list of other approvals that the division believes that Thunder Mountain might be required to obtain before the facility can be operated. Other than that, a Title V operating permit is required to be obtained for the gasifier, which the application is due within 12 months after initial startup of the gasifier. The medical waste incinerator rule requires this permit regardless of the facility's status with the major source threshold levels. Summary. No final decision on this application has been made by the Division of Air Quality. The public comment period has been extended until next Thursday, July 27, 2023 at 5 p.m. After that, the division will review all comments made, oral and written, and develop appropriate responses to the air quality related comments that pertain to the application in question. Once the appropriate responses have been developed, a final decision will be made on Thunder Mountain's application. Summarizing this statute, the Division of Air Quality is required to issue all permits that, if the respective application shows and or indicates that the proposed emission source or sources would achieve compliance with all applicable requirements and or emission standards. This applies to rules and regulations promulgated under the Air Pollution Control and Clean Air Acts. Thus, the division cannot take into consideration a final decision on any permit application, whether how the facility can or cannot comply with any requirements that were not developed under the Air Pollution and Clean Air Acts. The DEP email notice service. The DEP has an email notice service which anyone can register for by individual counties or statewide. A notice will be posted through this email notification service on all pending actions that require an opportunity for the public to participate in. This is one of the best tools available for the public to stay informed on actions made by the DEP. Reminder that anyone who wants to make any additional comments on the record has till 5 p.m. on next Thursday, July 27th, 2023 to do so. Contact information. Here's my contact information. The preferred means to submit comments or question is by email. Mailed-in comments will be accepted as well. These slides and a recording of this presentation will be posted on our website tomorrow morning. Now I would like to turn this back over to our Public Information Officer, Terry Fletcher.
All right, thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. Now we will move on to the question and answer segment of our meeting this evening. I have a list of folks who, when they registered, indicated they wish to ask a question. So I'm going to call on those names first, and then after that, we can take folks from anyone else who maybe now has a question or didn't have the opportunity to register, something like that. So the first name I have on my list is Frank Rocchio. So Mr. Rocchio, if you want to unmute your line and go ahead with your question. Are we losing?
Sorry, everyone. I was having trouble with the mute.
Oh, gotcha.
Good
No
evening.
problem.
Thank you. Sure. Questions. So, first question I have: Will the records and monitoring data related to the emergency generator be publicly available? And how frequently will the West Virginia DEP conduct audits to ensure compliance with record keeping and requirements? Would you like me to continue with the questions, or will there be a response?
Sorry. We can go ahead and tackle those kind of one by one, and we'll get to your next questions after this.
Frank, on the emergency generator, the hours of operation, a lot of it will be dependent upon how they write the Title V operating permit. Most likely, the current policy right now for this, the way this facility is, the emergency generator would not be included in the permit. And most likely, records on hours of operating the emergency generator would come into play with the actual inspection report that our inspector will perform. The facility, since it will be required to obtain a permit under the Title V operating permit program, the frequency will be a physical inspection once every 2 years, with also reviews of all their annual reports, which will consist of annual and semi-reports. The agency will also review those reports. And once they've submitted those reports, those will be added into our AX filing system, which the public can view.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay if I go to the next question?
Go ahead, Frank.
All right, thank you. How will the West Virginia DEP monitor Thunder Mountain's emissions of non-criteria regulated pollutants, including known or potential carcinogens, to ensure compliance with standards? And will there be ongoing health risk assessments for the surrounding communities?
For the we've picked out about 19 hazardous air pollutants, which will require to be monitored continuously. Other criteria, dioxins and furans will be tested for initial, and based on how the medical waste incinerator rule is set up, you're set up on operating parameters, and if you deviate outside those operating parameters, which is it's considered a violation. So it's kind of assumed if you don't stay within those, it's automatically assumed it's a non-compliance period. But the source can at any time request to change those settings by conducting their own another test, which they'll have to notify us of, and which will include a protocol. The director as well as the administrator can at any time request additional compliance for dioxins and furans, as well as any of the pollutants. Lead will be initially tested, as well as cadmium and mercury. So there's no real mechanism after that to do any follow-up toxics assessment on this individual source.
Okay, so you mentioned dioxins and furans. So just for clarification for myself, the proposed temperature, is the proposed temperature monitoring and regulation sufficient, from the standards that exist now to minimize the formation of dioxins and furans? Is everything being done to minimize the formation of those? And considering the toxicity of dioxins and furans, specifically within the range of the proposed operation, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we added in the temperature of the gasifier as well as the oxygen content monitoring, because if you're kind of familiar with the formation of dioxins and furans, it's not just having a chlorinated stream. It also requires oxygen as well as ideal temperature. We don't necessarily put in the permit a set range, but we're looking at the temperatures in terms of is that temperature at a significant formation rate, or is it changing in terms of actual operations? Well, and with conjunction with the actual dioxins and furan test.
Okay, thank you. I won't take up too much more time. I'm just going to throw in.
And also we're monitoring the temperature and the cyclone, because the other key important factor in formation of dioxins or furans is the temperature it stays at. So what we're hoping is once it's in the cyclone, the exhaust temperature will be significantly decreased and getting outside of that ideal formation zone. But we're asking for monitoring to kind of ensure that is actually happening.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple more, and then I'll let somebody else take over. But is there a detailed description of how wastewater from the cleaning of the equipment, right, from the blowdowns, will be treated and or disposed of?
That's outside of our media.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. And has a robust and well communicated emergency plan been conveyed at this point in terms of mitigating any potential spills or hazards or from transit?
That's again outside of. I mean, that's the source's responsibility to look at whether they're subject to the risk management plan, and it's actually administrated by the EPA directly.
Okay. Oh, last one. You had mentioned there won't be any record drugs, correct?
Correct.
Including feedstock. What is the verification process for that? Is it dependent upon state? What will the verification process be to ensure that record drugs aren't being accidentally included or included from the source of the feedstock?
That'll depend on how they develop their waste management plan with the sources they're getting, and we'll be, as the agency, we under air quality as well as Division of water and waste management, we actually both have our own separate hazardous waste teams, which will actually go out and perform inspections and look at the material. And it may not even be limited to the site itself. They may actually go to sites that are actually generating the waste and observe. And if they feel necessary, they'll administrate appropriate recommendations back to the facility.
Okay, Mr. Andrews, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I'll submit the rest via your email.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rocchio. Next, we have Leah Harper.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for this presentation, especially Mr. Andrews for your help and all the work that it must take to develop these parameters to be able to permit what I can see from just very little layman's background and research I can do on Google, that there is very little characterization of the processes that are successful, even of the input material, and especially of the output air emissions. So I commend you for taking on this task, because it does seem that the government is looking for solutions that may not be very good solutions, and we believe that incineration may be one of them. So I hope you appreciate my concern and how much we appreciate also your efforts as well. Is there a list somewhere of the 19 HAPs that we can take a look at, or is that in the presentation? I'm sorry, I will get a copy of this presentation right away, right?
Leah,
Uh-huh.
you're kind of came in and broken. There is a list of HAPs. It's actually in the evaluation, close to the end, under the, I believe it's the monitoring section. I got a little table, and that same table is also embedded in the actual permit.
Great. Okay, I'll take another look at the permit. And so then I am wondering also, as we are finding out about cumulative pollutants, because we just have an EPA grant that we're working on, and this is how we've learned a lot about what's going on in the valley, and we're concerned about cumulative pollutants being concentrated, especially during air inversions. I'm sure you are as well. So we're looking at these in the context of environmental justice and cumulative pollutants, and also greenhouse gases because of climate change, of course. So during these permit reviews, do you take any of those into consideration? Those cumulative pollutants, environmental justice, those issues?
Well, I'm gonna just kind of part your question. So we do take the HAPs on a cumulative basis to determine whether they're a major source, which could open the facility up to additional regulations. And what we're looking for is a cumulative total of 25 tons of total HAPs, or any single TAP greater than 10 tons per year, which would put them under, which would make the facility from area source to major source of HAPs, and bring in potentially additional regulations under Part 63. In terms of cumulative HAPs or other potential carcinogen pollutants, we don't do any assessment on that. And in regards to like environmental justice, I ask you to make that as a comment at this time. I mean, when you at your time of making oral comments.
I think I will, actually, I think I already have, and so I do appreciate this. Okay, just to give everybody else a chance to talk a little bit, this internally, you have the furniture temperatures, but also like the opacity for the workers that for internal, because they see some of the regulations are only for external and not for internal, which we know these facilities have problems, and also for startup and shutdown in particular. So will there be additional requirements for this?
Leah, we do not at the Division of Air Quality regulate indoor air quality, even for employees. That's not out inside of our scope. We regulate discharges to the atmosphere specifically, and in terms of the monitoring of fugitive, the regulation clearly notes that compliance can be satisfied by ensuring no fugitive emissions are being exhibited from the structure itself. So the monitoring has to be done, or the visible emission observations need to be done outside of the structure.
Okay, and just for one more question, I'm probably bumping up against my time, but I'm wondering about what is going to be measured continuously and as a grab sample. And we see the correlation between CO and dioxin furan emissions. And will that be monitored, and will there be models and calculations to be able to continuously monitor for likely emissions of dioxins and furans?
CO will be monitored continuously. Dioxins and furan will be initial compliance demonstration, which consists of 3 4-hour test runs, and then further compliance demonstration with the dioxins and furans will be based upon monitoring the operating parameters of the carbon injection system, as well as the fabric filter temperature that was recorded during those compliance demonstrations that showed compliance with the standard.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you so much for your explanations. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Leah. Next, we have Heather Sprouse.
Good evening. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to learn about this facility and pose questions. So I've heard that a lot of communities, both in and out of state, have shown strong opposition to these types of medical waste gasification facilities, mostly from concerns about toxic air emissions, including known carcinogens and other health and well-being considerations. So communities in both Jackson and the surrounding counties are already overburdened by pollution, and many are highlighted as being disadvantaged environmental justice census tracts, according to the federal Justice 40 initiative. So with that in consideration, I'm wondering, how does DEP plan to further community engagement around this proposed facility, especially in consideration of environmental justice impacts?
Thanks, Heather. I can take that one. So, as far as, environmental justice impacts and things like that, I mean, we do our best to ensure that, these meetings and the notices and things like that are made available to the public. We post these on our Facebook and Twitter accounts, our social media. We, as Ed mentioned during his presentation, we have a public notice listserv. They're also published in the county's newspaper of record in the counties where these permitting actions are taking place. So we try to, on multiple fronts, ensure that we are putting this information out there for the public. We also include information on our website that's always available for folks. So, we're trying many different avenues to ensure that the community is aware of what's going on. And again, we're holding this meeting virtually so that as many folks, even that aren't in the actual Jackson County area, have a chance to attend and learn about what's going on. So again, we're going to continue down that path and explore new options, new ways that we can extend our reach and extend our engagement with citizens, just to make sure that they're engaged and that we're answering as many questions as we can, and taking all their comments and concerns into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. I appreciate your response. I'll just ask one other question because I am also curious, as Leah stated, about DEP's plans to address environmental justice concerns, but I heard that that's something that will need to be responded to later, though I would like it if in that response we could consider cumulative impacts, because as we all know, there's a multitude of polluting facilities that are permitted throughout the Ohio River Valley. So while I look forward to that response, the only other question I'll ask now is, so records and monitoring data are going to need to be easily accessible to the public in a format that can be understood by the average citizen. So I'm wondering what DEP's plans are to facilitate that type of transparent communication with the community.
So, we're going to look at the monitoring results and everything once they come in, and we'll certainly look at ways that we can make sure that that's as easily understandable as possible. I do want to, kind of caution that, it's when you're dealing with very, complex issues, it can be very hard to, just put them at a very easily understood level if you don't have a background or experience with how to read these reports and things like that. But again, our staff is always available to take questions, to explain reports and monitoring results to anyone who may have questions about those. So again, I encourage folks to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help walk you through that, and whatever we're able to put together for folks. So just want to stress that, we're here, we're available to the public at any time, and our doors is always open and our phones are always on.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is Ed Andrews. I'm going to add to that.
Excuse me, our compliance and enforcement section, they actually review these semi-annual, annual compliance reports, as well as each and every individual stack test or performance compliance demonstration, and which they include in the actual electronic record a memo documenting either the source passed or failed, or why was there an issue with the demonstration. So it kind of I guess it's what I actually look for when I'm reviewing an existing facility, whether they had a good test they're basing their emissions on or not. So it'll actually be in the electronic files.
Heather, did you have any other questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Dwayne Nichols.
There we go. I figured out how to unmute myself there. I wanted to know, are we aware of any other approximately 20 ton per year so-called Vista thermal gas fire projects in the United States? And you referred to the bypass vent, and I didn't see a flow sheet. I couldn't find it. So I wanted to know what is being bypassed with that vent. Does that bypass go to the stack? And am I correct that there's no flare on that stack?
Mr. Nichols, there are a couple applications. I'm trying to think, was it a gasifier? I know one was a pyrolysis, which was bigger than this one. I think there is I think it was called Monarch Waste Technologies, it's no longer a facility, but it was out in New Mexico on an Indian reservation, and it fell directly under EPA's authority to be permitted. But it's no longer operational. But that's probably the one that really comes close to the same capacity as this particular unit.
I see.
And to go into the bypass vent, so the bypass vent is really for if they need to bypass the controls for some malfunction, whatever they need. And it's actually in the incinerator rule that if they have a bypass device, they have to have a continuous monitor noting what position the valve is in, whether it's going to control devices or not. And basically it just bypasses to a secondary vent that circumvents the controls. And in my understanding, that's kind of common with medical waste incinerators.
Are you implying that this is coming off the gasifier and bypassing the downstream cleanup,
Yes.
then going directly to the stack?
No, going directly to atmosphere. It's literally a bypass around the controls to atmosphere. And there's a couple drawings in the actual files.
My gosh, that would be quite hazardous, wouldn't it?
I can't comment on that.
Okay. My last question at this time, the waste management plan is something I don't understand. Does this mean that if they decide to, and they maybe need to, they will open up these bags and sort materials before they put it into the shredder?
That's on the that's their operator. That's not on us. But it's I think the intent from why EPA put it in the rule is to develop a plan how to properly sort it at the generator, not necessarily third party. So
Right. Yeah.
So they have to figure that out. It's not the duty of the agency to figure that aspect of their maintenance or waste management plan. It's just a requirement that's in the rule, and it is what it is.
Wouldn't that be the worst job in the state, to have to open these bags and sort out this stuff before it goes to the shredder?
I can't answer that. I think there's some worse jobs than that.
Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Next, we have Angie Rosser.
Thank you. This is all helpful. Always appreciate the Q&A format of these DAQ meetings. Ed, do you know if are there any other facilities like this in West Virginia that have been permitted or in operation or in the process of being permitted?
My knowledge, the only medical waste incinerator is CMC's medical waste incinerator at General Division in Charleston. Empire Green Generation is not a incinerator. It's a full-fledged pyrolysis unit, and it is not subject to the regulation, but they are permitted to handle infectious medical waste from this office. But to my knowledge, they have not started operations.
Okay. Something that's confusing me is, was brought to my attention, there's a Department of Health Rule 64 CSR 56 that clearly prohibits incineration technology in any form as disposal for commercial medical waste facilities. So wondering if you're aware of that rule, if you've been consulting with DHHR or whatever the new iteration is over there. And, you know, is there anything you can do to help us understand why you're even contemplating this permit if that prohibition is in place?
We were given an application from Thunder Mountain Environmental Services. The way our regulations are set up, we are only allowed to evaluate the rules and regulations developed under the Air Pollution Control Act, which was promulgated by the West Virginia legislature, which gives us authority to develop rules and regulations. And most of those rules and regulations adopts federal regulations that are adopted that were formed under the Clean Air Act. The rule you're specifically noting, the West Virginia legislature explicitly noted the director or secretary of the DHHR has the duty and responsibility for that rule, and we can't step over into that rule.
Right.
And
Okay.
I'm not, and I'm not meaning to be mean, but it's just they've submitted an application and we have to process it in terms of our rules and regulations at this time.
Yeah, I understand. Have you been consulting with DHHR? I mean, you showed that slide with the various permits that I'll want to go back to when you post these.
I talked to their counterpart that's over, I think they're it's called Environmental Services. And I do talk to her in terms of where are they at with their applications, as well as I let them know where we're at. But
Okay, well, that's good. Do you have any knowledge of that slide you showed of the various permits, the status of any of those, and what the public participation opportunities will be?
no, those are, other than that, the source will have to get a Title V permit from our office, which is because it's an operating permit, they're allowed to actually construct and operate it. They just have to submit the application within 12 months after initial startup. Those offices, you probably need to contact them directly in terms of where the status is or not.
Okay. Terry, do you know anything about the water permits in DEP?
I mean, as it relates to, you know, this specific facility, no. I mean, we'd have to wait to see what their application says and what they're proposing that they're going to do and that would determine, you know, what permits and what sign-offs they would need from our water division. I mean, I've talked to, you know, some of our permitting folks about this for, you know, the Empire Green facility, and like I said, it could go one of many different ways. It just really depends on, like we said, what they're proposing how they operate as far as waste management and discharge and things like that. So we just have to, at this point, wait to see what Thunder Mountain proposes as far as a water permit.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm good for now.
Thank you. All right. That's all the folks that we had listed to register to ask a question, but we've now opened the floor up to anyone else who maybe didn't do that or now has a question that they'd like to ask. If you want to use the raise hand function, it's down here at the bottom of your screen. Looks like we've got one already. All right. So Rick Buckley, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Yes. First question, how many residents of Jackson County are on this call? Are you able to tell that?
We don't have that. We don't have that. We don't ask for, you know, their address or where, you know, where folks live as far as when they registered for the meeting. So,
you know, because I contacted the newspaper. I just found out about this today, and I contacted the newspaper as to, you know, they had not run an article about this facility, and they were unaware. So even with all your outreach, which is great, I mean, I'm on your listserv and receive notices all the time, but you know, something fell through the cracks there that our local newspaper did not have the information about this, which is unfortunate because this has been an eye opener for me. I haven't looked at the permit. I don't know anything about the permit. I know I'm downstream for air quality from the facility. And based on some of the comments that have been made, some of the questions that have been raised, I would have to say at this point, I'm adamantly opposed to the facility being constructed. And one of the main reasons I'm opposed is I don't think there's been enough experience with these type of facilities based on the responses we've had from you all with these type of facilities to construct something like this that folks are going to be downstream breathing the air. And I'm really concerned about the lack of regulatory oversight. If I heard right, you don't inspect this site, but only 2 or 3 years, I think I heard. Is that correct?
We, this is Ed Andrews. With our agreement with EPA, we're required to physically visit and inspect the site every 2 years for Title V operating permits. That doesn't mean we don't follow up with additional inspections. We typically try to visit when sources do compliance demonstrations, at least stop in, visit, observe what is actually being occurred during the testing. There a lot of our what we call compliance activities really requires detailed review of records and reports they've submitted or lack of submitted. So
Thanks.
it's kind of a continuous process. So
Well, on speaking of the monitoring records, and what I think I heard was there will be continuous monitoring installed on the stacks and any other outlet ventilation from the facility that will be monitored hourly, minute by minute, or how will that work? And then how often do you get those records to review them to determine if they're staying in compliance or not?
For the gasifier, it will actually, we'll be looking at continuous, and it depends on the instrumentation, but it can be as frequent as every 60 seconds, measuring actual sample. In terms of a actual review of the that information, I'm thinking it's going to be every 6 months, but a lot of it will, and it can be subject to change through the Title V operating permit.
Yeah, right off 6 months to review monitoring records is way too long, especially when we're talking about the discharges into the atmosphere that we're breathing here in Jackson County. So, and then my follow-up on that is there a self-reporting requirement of the company if they have a bad discharge?
Yes.
Okay.
They have a exceedance. They have to report it.
Okay. And what is the penalty if they don't?
I can't really talk about that one. I've only worked here for 24 years, and there's a such thing as a penalty matrix, and I've never had the pleasure of seeing one, so I don't know what it looks like.
Okay.
they keep that pretty tight.
Okay. Well, I know I mentioned this too, and I'll send in some comments or additional questions that I think need to be pursued. But a couple of times it's been brought up about environmental justice. And I think that needs to be part of this process.
Well,
I
I can take that one if you don't mind. So yeah, I know that's, a term that's been brought up, and, I want to point out that, currently we don't have the regulatory authority to include environmental justice type criteria in our permitting and enforcement processes. So, when you talk about the income of a certain area or the racial makeup of a certain area, those aren't issues that we can include into our permitting process right now. That is something that would have to be changed either through the state legislature or through federal rules and regulations through that way. So again, I understand your concern there and what your point that you're trying to make. But again, we have to stay within the framework that we have, which is again established by state rules, federal regulations.
Yeah, I didn't know that didn't apply for the state program, but EPA is required to consider environmental justice, correct?
No, not that we're aware of. I mean, I know there is an initiative that they're starting to focus on those type of issues, but I'm not aware of any federal regulations that have been passed specifically for environmental justice.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a schematic drawing of the facility that's available?
Yeah, I believe there's one available in the application.
And where can I obtain the application?
It is on our website, but I'll have your information here and we'll follow up and make sure that someone provides that to you.
Okay, thanks, Terry. And right off, in Jackson County, where will the facility be located?
Yeah.
This is Ed Andrews. Are you familiar with belt transfer?
Yes.
It's going to be in one of their warehouse buildings that sits a little further away from the road.
Okay. Between Millwood and Ravenswood.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate you all putting this on. This is great. It's really helpful, and I appreciate you responding to questions during this session. And I'll just leave it at that for right now. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, Angie, I believe you raised your hand a moment ago.
Oh, thank you for getting me a second round. But this might help with our written comments. Ed, I'm wondering if you could speak generally to where DAQ has discretionary authority for enhanced protections or enhanced monitoring. I mean, we hear a lot that we don't have that regulatory authority, but where do you have discretion? Can you speak to that?
Hi, this is Bev McEwen. I'm the New Source Review Program Manager. We really, I hate to say it, but we really don't have much discretion. The Federal Clean Air Act is very specific that states cannot be less stringent than the federal rules. And the West Virginia State Code is very specific that says we cannot be more stringent than the federal rules, which basically means we have to follow the rules and regulations as written, and there's very little discretion, so to speak. We can only permit a source based on the rules and regulations as they apply.
I'm hogging a follow-up, Terry. Remind me, is that in state code where you just have your hands totally tied on doing anything more stringent than the federal regs? I mean, and if there are certain circumstances where you think that would be justified, is that codified?
Yes, it's in the state code, chapter 22, article 5, which is the air pollution section of the Environmental Protection Act.
Thank you.
For West Virginia.
Thanks, Bev.
Okay. Thank you, Angie. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Maybe we didn't sign up that indicated they wish to do so. If you do, please raise your hand. We'll call on you. Anyone joining by phone who maybe doesn't have the raise hand option, you're welcome to just shout out your question. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised. So if that's the case, if there's no more questions, we're going to go ahead and move on to our comment portion. Again, I want to remind folks that now that we've entered this stage, we won't be responding to any more questions this evening. We just want to make sure that we get everyone's comments. And each commenter will be given 5 minutes, and then if time allows, we can circle back to additional comments. So similar to the question and answer segment, I've got a few folks here that have already signed up to give their comments. Looks like we're going in the same order as the questions. So first we have Frank Rocchio. So Mr. Rocchio, if you want to unmute your line and begin your comments.
Sure. Hi, thanks everybody. I'll just go through these comments real quick. This was touched on a little bit earlier, I think, but frequent and transparent communication should be held with the local community about the facility's operations, including any incidents or breaches. This simple act can build trust and allow residents to make informed decisions about their health. This could include community meetings, newsletters, or a dedicated website. Next, a robust, well-communicated emergency response plan should be developed and implemented to both protect the facility and the surrounding community in the event of an incident. This plan should be developed in cooperation with local emergency services and should be communicated to the local community. Next, it would be crucial to ensure that the impacts of the plan do not disproportionately fall on disadvantaged or minority communities. An environmental justice analysis should be conducted, and if necessary, additional measures should be implemented to protect these communities. Before fully operationalizing the project, consider running pilot scale studies to test and optimize the safety features, emissions controls, and operational procedures. Lastly, noise can also be a form of pollution, so effective noise control measures should be in place to prevent disturbance to the local community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rocchio. Next, we have Leah Harper. She's still with us. Leah, are you there? You may be muted.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear my question?
You're kind of breaking up on us. You there?
Okay, I'm sorry. I have a bad connection. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. The comment before about the gasifier going directly to the atmosphere, is that correct? I meant to ask that question, yeah.
Well, let me back up. From the gasifier, the syn gas is burned in the fire tube. Exhaust goes through the boiler. From the boiler, it goes to a cyclone, then a dry scrubber, carbon injection, fiber filter baghouse.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm still working on my comments, but I would like that this fairly new technology, I don't know the difference between incineration and pyrolysis, and I'm doing a lot of research to find out more of the data of the actual emissions of these facilities, because we're very concerned once again about cumulative air emissions. So looking at the data that is out there, it is so insufficient regulations and time. So I think I'm just going to work on my comments, but I think that's the main point that I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have Heather Sprouse.
Hi again. Yeah, really appreciating this time this evening, learning a lot. So I'll keep this brief. I'd just like to reiterate that communities already in the state as well as out of state have shown serious opposition to these types of facilities because of the toxic air emissions as well as other concerns. And just for the record, I really do think that environmental justice is a big issue here, especially because of cumulative impacts. So if DAQ decides to move forward regardless, I just would like to state that the West Virginia Sierra Club will be submitting comments, and we support the comments that they're submitting on how to address certain issues, including concerns that we have about insufficiencies in the air dispersion modeling, which my understanding is that was pulled from data at the Parkersburg Airport, which is on a hilltop instead of in the valley where this facility would be sited. We also have concerns about waste management protocols. There's a lot of unanswered questions there. And I believe that there are I should take a look again at the greenhouse gas emission limits, but we found them to be insufficient, as well as the dioxin emission limits. Both should be lowered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have a Brian Fennell.
Hi, I'm Brian Fennell. I'm president of Renaissance Environmental Services. We are the owner of Thunder Mountain, and I want to just commend the department on their robust view of and our back and forth over the past year plus on this permit process, and really appreciated the back and forth and the input we got from them in terms of in terms of how we've progressed this project from here on in. So it's my only comment. Thank you very much for for your efforts, and we look forward to a good future together.
Thank you. Next we have Dwayne Nichols.
Thank you very much. In spite of limitations that may exist within the West Virginia State Code, it is also the responsibility of the Department of Environmental Protection to provide leadership to the state within these categories of air quality, water pollution control, etc. So the responsibility cannot be avoided because we need leadership in West Virginia to provide ideas, to make proposals to the governor, to the legislature, and to the agency itself. Take, for example, just a few instances here. Carbon dioxide is, as we know, the primary greenhouse gas, and this overall process, from that point of view, is nothing but the conversion of waste material to CO2 and other oxides. So call it pyrolysis if you will. The applicant may call it pyrolysis, but we all know, we all can see that we're starting with raw material and converting it to oxides primarily, almost exclusively in terms of tonnage, carbon dioxide. Let's take the instance of odors. It says in the paperwork that odor regulation in West Virginia is state enforced only. But that doesn't mean that we ignore odors unless somebody at the state level happens to be motivated. The operators of this plant should be looking for odors all the time. The DEP can make suggestions and recommendations in the best interest of all concerned. Suppose that the operators detected odors and self-reported. I noticed, for example, that leaks, when detected, need to be fixed. But who would believe this? The operators are given 15 days to fix a leak. Now, if I have a leak in my house and I wait 15 days to fix it, it's going to take me $10,000 of repairs. There hasn't been talk about flares. And I think if we're going to have vents, if we're going to have bypasses, we may well need a flare to protect the community. Similarly, noise is undoubtedly going to result from the shredder. And so leadership and concern for our state would lead us to make recommendations and provide for alternatives to approach these. Air pollution episodes sometimes happen, and that's when much of the concern, much of the damage from air pollution occurs. Operational excursions from explosions or fires or atmospheric inversions. I would like to reiterate and support the comments of Frank with the OVC or OVE category, because I agree with the recommendations and suggestions that he made, including a generalized understanding of environmental justice. I want to thank the DEP for the effort that has gone into this analysis and preparation of documents. And on final, I want to say this. One of the documents on the website is 1,974 pages. That is beyond reasonable in terms of size. The website's not that user-friendly as it is, especially for many of us out here in the state where our internet service is poor. I'm on twisted pair cable for my internet, and it's only up and running maybe 40% of the time, and even then it's weak. So I was unable to read that document. 1,974. So there would be justification to break that down into 200-page units and give us another month to study it, because I'm up in a corner and I've not been able to read. My access simply failed. I was unable to read that document, 1,974 pages. Thank you for this opportunity. That's my statement.
Thank you. Next, we have Angie Rosser.
Okay, yes, Angie Rosser, and I'm representing West Virginia Rivers Coalition. We should probably point out that Heather Sprouse is also representing West Virginia Rivers Coalition tonight. So she's already stated some of our comments that we wanted to share, and we agree with a lot of good points and questions that have been raised tonight. And we're going to be keenly interested in the water permits if and when we get to that point. I'll just say, the interest around this, I think, will only increase as people learn, this being a very fairly novel and new technology and facility for the state of West Virginia, and that, it's on the heels of Empire Green. It's in the context of announcement of, I think it's Clean Seas, in Kanawha County. Sounds like similar facilities. So it seems like there's a new trend in West Virginia, and that we should approach with a lot of caution. We should make sure that our rules and regs are up to speed to address the protections needed for these kind of new facilities and technologies in our state. And it is troubling to hear, but I understand that DEP has its hands tied when it comes to conforming with the laws and regulations that are legislated, and that we're in a pretty tight spot in West Virginia where we cannot, it sounds like, apply much discretion, even if the agency does see a science-based or public health rationale for some kind of special conditions or protections. That's concerning, and I know that that's probably more of a legislative conversation, but it is in the agency's purview to bring that before the public and legislature when there are maybe ways we need to catch up our rules to meet the moment. So that's it for now. Always appreciate the DEP staff and DAQ staff for being open and accessible and providing this information. I do think it's a great idea to do more community outreach in Jackson County and utilize local media contacts there to help get the word out and be as transparent and open as possible with community members that stand to be most impacted by this type of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. That is the last person that we had signed up, but if there's anyone else who is in attendance tonight that would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function. We'll call on you to make your comments. Anyone else that would like to make a comment? Anyone by phone who maybe doesn't have the raise hand function? Okay. I'm not seeing any other raised hands. So going once, going twice. Okay. If there are no more comments, we will close the public meeting for the Thunder Mountain air permit application for this evening. The comment period will close on 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. As we mentioned earlier, written comments can be submitted to Ed Andrews at edward.s.andrews@wv.gov or by regular mail to the attention of Ed Andrews at the DEP's Division of Air Quality at 601 57th Street Southeast in Charleston, West Virginia, 25304. Again, I want to make sure that your name and contact information is in the meeting chat, or that you registered with us through the registration form. So we have your contact information. I want to thank everyone for your interest and for taking the time to attend this meeting. Have a good evening.